Hi again. Just one of those recordings and just sort of going over my recollections of an archaeological career, whether it's been misspent or not being able to get to my full potential. So yesterday, the previous one, we spoke about the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust. There will be a part 2 and maybe a part 3. But I want to start this off with the following statement. Somebody once mentioned to me that I was destined to be the archaeologist. I was going to be somebody in archaeology in South Wales, right? And obviously, I started upsetting the wrong people like the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust, and that was never to be. However, I want to talk about the Institute of Field Archaeology, or as it's now known, the Chartered Institute of Field Archaeology. Now, one of the things that I wanted to put across was a good friend of mine called Stephen Clark. I've got to remember that I need to do one of these recordings about Stephen Clark, Monmouth. He's actually got an MBE for his services to archaeology. Love the guy, brilliant guy. Ended up doing Time Team, Monmouth Archaeological Society, Monmouth Archaeology, Contractual Archaeologist, watching briefs. Love him to bits. He even had a shop front in the middle of Mono Street in Monmouth, and you could see an archaeological excavation taking place for years. It was in current archaeology all the time. Anyway, that aside, he became a member of the Institute of Field Archaeology, and for years he said, "Oh, why didn't you apply to be a member?" And with one thing and another, with the opposition from the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust and sort of other organisations, I was not able to become a member. However, eventually, I became a member of the Institute of Field Archaeology in the year, it was 2000, I think it was, I gotta get this right, hasn't I? 2005. And this was a really important year for me, because when I became a member of the Institute of Field Archaeology, I had a couple of archaeological projects coming my way, and there was a big one that came my way in July 2005, and it happened to be at Boverton. And this site at Boverton, it was a really, really big watching brief. I got paid thousands and thousands of pounds to do it, a lot of money to do the watching brief there. And it was a really big area and I was here, there and everywhere. It went on for week after week after week after week. It went on for ages. Anyway, I did this watching brief there, and throughout the whole thing, I was very aware that now I was a member of the Institute of Field Archaeology. At that stage, I had a postgraduate diploma in archaeology with Leicester University. And, everything was sort of flowing hunky-dory, right? And actually, I do believe I must have, it was, 2005. And everything was fine. And the weirdest thing was, this will link up with the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust, introductions I've been given, because I was able to phone the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust and speak to a guy called Neil Malem. And now that name will come up again, right? And it was a really weird time, because I remember phoning up Neil, and it was like, "Oh, hi, Carl. How are you?" And it was like really strange. It was as if I was a professional archaeologist. I was doing professional archaeological work. I was qualified to do it. I was experienced to do it. But I was also a professional in the fact that I was also a member of the Institute of Field Archaeology. I was a practitioner of the Institute of Field Archaeology. And I would have conversations with him, and it'd be like, "Oh, how are things going? Yeah, I'm doing the Boverton one," and everything was fine. It was like so. It was odd because of the first time in my life I was a real proper, treated, respected archaeologist. It was really, really strange. And I remember phoning Neil, and I said, look, Neil, there's something wrong with the project. What do I do? And he would say, you've got to do this and that and whatever. You could put a stop on this and so on, so on, and all these different things. And anyway, it was really, really on time. And you know, we were we were setting up a website, and everything was fine. And then suddenly I realised I've got to be nice to the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust because they're being nice to me. They're treating me like a proper, real, bona fide, qualified, experienced institute field archaeology professional archaeologist. So that was really, really odd. Suddenly everything had come together, and my career was perfect. And however, I started making mistakes, and the mistakes were back then my OCD was getting really bad, and I had severe OCD, and it was getting bad, and I don't know. I was making mistakes. I wasn't able to get the project done when I was supposed to. I wouldn't get the project done until early 2007. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about that time in 2007. When I handed in the project, my report, which was about it was close on 100 pages long, so it was a really big, chunky report full of photographs, full of illustrations, and so on. And it was obviously it was a professional report as an IFA member and whatever. But by the time I handed it in, within weeks I was, because of another reason, no longer a member of the IFA. Anyway, long story short, I started shouting my mouth off, and there was there was the Council of British Archaeology sort of forum, and I was a member of that, and there was two things that were picked up. The one that I had refused, I don't know. I had somebody working for me at the time, and he had done something on an archaeological project, and I basically said, "Look, that's it. Your job's over." And okay, he accepted it, but I made it out to be a lot more convoluted on the forum. Big archaeologist, big me, and so on. And I made out that I didn't give the person any sort of I didn't sort of give him any proper disciplinary procedure. I just sacked him, and that was it. Anyway, he wasn't employed, but we didn't see eye to eye, and that was it. He went. Anyway, I was spouting my mouth off, and I was also involved in politics back then. And 2005 had actually been a parliamentary candidate, so I was actually, quite high up in the Liberal Party, and the chief I was on the executive committee of the Liberal Party. Anyway, long story short, I also put on this sort of forum that I would not employ anybody who was a member of the Labour Party, or I would not employ anybody that was a councillor, and not employ anybody that was a socialist and I'd not employ anyone who was a communist. Anyway, that was out there, right? And I'm not saying any of these views are the views that I've got now, but this is what I was putting out there. And unfortunately, with those two issues, one of the lecturers at Leicester University, the university I got a postgraduate diploma from, he had actually made a complaint, a formal complaint to the IFA. And it was like, this is wrong. He can't refuse to employ anybody who's a member of the Labour Party, for example. And anyway, the IFA took this as, putting the Institute of Field Archaeology disrepute as it was then. It was the IFA, not the Chartered Institute of Field Archaeology. Anyway, refused to. I was just putting this out there, whether I was being genuine or real or whatever. It's not the issue. Anyway, the whole point is that, I wasn't too well then with the OCD, and the IFU was saying, look, we will forgive you as long as you apologise. And I just thought, I just didn't respond in the way they wanted to. Anyway, I know this sounds all convoluted, but in 2007, my life was starting to free fall big time. And I couldn't deal with this disciplinary procedure. I was not very well, and basically they filed against me, and it turned out that I was to be, thrown out the Institute of Field Archaeology for those two things. Not because I was a bad archaeologist, but because I was involved in politics. So on those two issues, you can check this up on the internet. A disciplinary procedure. Those are the two issues. That's out there. So I'm one of the only archaeologists in the history of the Institute of Field Archaeology to be ever chucked out. And whether I thought I was being scapegoated or something back then, I was thrown out of the IFA. Very few people have ever been thrown out of the IFA, ever. In the history of the IFA, really bad archaeologists because they're crap at being archaeologists. They've never been thrown out. Very few people have been thrown out, but I was thrown out of the IFA. Anyway, the point is with all of this, this was something like, this was January 2007. So I'd only been a member a year and a half, 2 years. And it was, it was so bad that, and at that time, another job had come in, and this guy had phoned me from the Cosmeston area, and he said, we need an archaeologist to do this work. And I said, right, okay, I think I can still do it, but it was blocked. I wasn't allowed to do it anymore because I was no longer a member of the Institute for Archaeology. Well, the law basically says that as long as you're a professional archaeologist, it's advised that, it's good to be a member of the IFA, but it's not necessary. Anyway, that project I was not able to do that watching brief. And so obviously I was unable to work. I've done professional archaeological work since, I've done another project at Boverton since that point. I've done other watching brief work in the Vale of Glamorgan, in Bridgend and so on. I've done other stuff since. This is 2007, that's 15 years ago. I've done other stuff since, and I'm a hell of a lot more qualified now. I've got a master's degree in archaeology, so, I could take on anything. But anyway, weirdest thing was that when I phoned up the Glamorgan and Gwent Archaeological Trust, the first thing was, you are now scum. You're no longer a member of the IFA. We will not talk to you, and you're not allowed ever to do any archaeological work ever again. And that was it. That was it. And this Neil Malem, right? He spoke to me like absolute dirt. Now, he was really pally a couple of weeks before. He was even talking about, how's it going building? We had a house and we were going to convert a house back then, right? All that went to crap. I lost it all. But he was really pally. And then the next minute he was like, he was really against me, and it was just like, oh God. And the thing is, I've tried to apply to join the IFA since, and this was some time ago. Not when I say some time ago, it was involving what was happening at the 5 Mile Lane, the A4, the A4, the A4. Oh God, I've forgotten what it bloody called now. Anyway, it was the 5 Mile Lane project, and basically, I filed against the Rubicon Heritage, and I said, look, they're leaving human remains on site. Right, I got photographs of them leaving human remains on site. I said, they're not wearing helmets, they're not wearing high vis, and they're not doing this and they're not doing that, right? They were not doing anything right, Rubicon Heritage, really cowboy outfit. And basically the IFA did nothing. They basically said, it's so perverse what you're saying, and I said, you got all these photographs, I got all these videos, it's so perfect, and the weird thing was, I then realised that, the IFA are definitely as bent and corrupt. And I just thought, right, the thing was, in 2018, before all this sort of kicked off with Rubicon Heritage and the 5 Mile Lane and them destroying the archaeology and leaving human remains across the site, which I had photographs of and all the rest of it. Before all that kicked off, I went and applied to join the IFA in 2018 and early 2018. And there was this woman there called Alex, right? And she basically said, yeah, you'll be a member. It'll be fine. She kept saying, you'll be a member. It'll be fine. I had loads of these emails going back and forth. And she said, yeah, it'll be fine. There's no problem. We've got all this evidence to say that you've done all this archaeological work. You can be a member and so on, blah, blah, blah. And it got to the last minute. Say, yeah, you'll get in. It's fine. We just got to go through some paperwork. And then they blocked me. And she had been lying all along, and I felt as sick as a dog. So I went into having a disciplinary procedure against her. So, and the person who would support me in that application was actually Stephen Clark. That's why I mentioned him at the beginning. In both applications, the first one that I got to be a practitioner, the second one, he backed up my application to be a member, and now I had somebody else to back me up as well, but that's that. Anyway, that's the IFA and a bunch of cowboys, and thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow will be another recording, and hopefully we'll get on to doing another Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust one again, and we can talk about that. We can talk about Gabriel Skaridis. We could talk about Gareth Dowdall, and we can talk about the long knives, and we can talk about all these different things. Anyway, and a chap by the name of Andy Hinton, if anyone's ever heard of him. Anyway, thank you very much. This is Karl-James Advert. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join my channel. Thank you very much.